Good morning, everyone. Just tried a different camera angle. Equally as useless, but makes my cup look massive, doesn't it? Anyway, this is number 36 in my review series of Richard Layman, where I'm going to be going through the novels of Richard Layman from worst to best and giving just a little bit of my thoughts on him. Part of the reason why I'm doing this is because Richard Layman was the first horror author that I ever binge read. He's the first horror author whose entire collection of work I got through relatively quickly, bar a few books that many years later I finally managed to discover. So he's one of the big influences of my interest in horror fiction. But he's also a horror author who, whilst he was quite popular in the UK rather, and Australia, and indeed Japan, I've got an interesting story to tell you about Japan when we get to the book in question. He was also not very popular in America until near his death, really. And going through YouTube, there are very few reviews of his books on YouTube. Certainly in terms of entire collections, I've only found one, which is very good. The person who did it is a British guy who lives in Russia, but he hasn't posted for several years. I've tried to get in touch with him because I'm not even sure if he's still with us. But I'd advise you to check out his review site. It's really, really good. But most of the reviews that I've come across have been pretty bad. There have been reviews where they can't pronounce his name. There was one guy who was burping all the way through his videos. Another guy didn't understand. It's just really, really, really terrible reviews, basically, of what I'm trying to say. They didn't really give you any information about the books. And because of that, I thought I might as well throw my content out there on YouTube because there just doesn't seem to be an awful lot of informative stuff about Richard Layman, really, which is a bit of a shame. Because for all his flaws, and he had many, he did set out to entertain, and he was a fun read, especially these best books we'll get to. But I started off this series with number 37 in my list, which was Island, which is the only book by Layman that he's wrote that I genuinely hate with a passion. And it's not because it's his worst written book or his worst story. I've gone into all the main details as to why I genuinely hate that book, but that's the only one that I hate. The next few books on this list, as we go through from 36 upwards, are all fairly interchangeable. I dislike them all for a variety of reasons, but I've decided at number 36 to put his 1997 book, After Midnight, at this point, because of all the books Layman wrote, this one is probably the most badly structured and thought out. It came at a point. Layman wrote a lot of great books up until the mid-90s, but between 1995 and 98, he had this period of time where he was churning out some of his worst material, and a lot of it tends to be short story ideas that were padded out to the length of a novel that just don't feel like full-length novels. And After Midnight is easily the worst of those. It's a story about a girl called Alice. That's not her real name, but she thinks it's a nice sort of portmanteau of alias. She's basically babysitting, looking after this house that her friends, who we never meet, live in there on holiday. And somebody tries to break in. They get into the pool. She takes a sword to defend herself. And that really is all that the synopsis gives you. It's not a synopsis as such as a description of what happens in the first chapter of the book. Again, I have to spoil certain things with the book, although I'm going to try and keep as many spoilers as fair as possible, because this book in particular is so absolutely insane as to really need some explanation. So basically, Alice, she receives a phone call. It's off somebody she doesn't know. This guy phones her up. She tells this guy there's some maniac outside. And then he decides randomly he's going to come over. He doesn't know who she is, but he's going to come over to the house anyway. And she picks up a sword, and then there's a knock on the door. So what does Alice do? She goes, instead of not knocking on the door or anything, not opening the door, or bolting the door, locking herself, or calling the police or anything, she opens the door and she hacks up the guy who's out there, who happens to just be the guy that's phoned her up. He's got her address, he's come over, and she just murders him. He's not the guy who was hanging around outside. She's just killed him. She feels very little remorse about it. She's not particularly bothered about this. What she actually does is put his body in her car, cleans up the mess, and then starts to figure out how she's going to dispose of this body. And this leads to a whole series of utterly bizarre events that take place all over the course of one night and then the next day, where Alice will proceed to either murder or attempt to murder pretty much everyone she comes in contact with. She's clearly a psychopathic maniac because she has zero remorse for who she kills, but she also is incredibly overtly emotional in every sense. As soon as somebody pays her a compliment, she's in tears. There's a guy she meets, a wannabe writer, who decides he's going to pay her for her story because he clearly has no ideas of his own. After just meeting her, which is bizarre, and she falls in love with him. And what she asks him to do, most normal people would be phoning the police and thinking this person's deranged, but this guy goes along with it. But she ends up killing him because of the most ridiculous reasons. There's a girl that she tries to murder, but she leaves for dead, who then, is then kidnapped by this, just so happens to be this maniac living in the woods. And she leaves her to her fate. Excuse me. But later on, literally, this girl's been shot and tied to a post and assaulted and all sorts. But later on, Alice decides. She decides to go back for her, not because she wants to, but because she kind of has to, and this girl basically falls in love with Alice. I've said before that characters in Layman stories often fall in love with other characters. Usually it's very attractive girls who have got everything going for them, falling in love with the creepiest, most pathetic specimens of mankind imaginable. Men who've got absolutely no redeeming features, and women just drop everything at them. In this case, we've got a woman who is, our main protagonist is a psychopath. She has zero redeeming qualities. She doesn't care about murder. The more people she kills, the only concern she's got is of how she can get away with this and clean up her mess. It's like it doesn't faze her one little bit. She's not remotely bothered about taking life. And yet she'll become immensely emotional if anybody so much as remotely praises how she looks. It's so contrived in terms of how connected this story is. The fact that the guy who's hanging around her friend's house, it's not even where she lives. She's just staying there. She could have phoned the police and then gone to wherever she comes from. This guy would never have found her. He happens to know the other guy in the woods. What are the chances? It's literally, it's just such a contrived and stupid story. It's terribly written and plotted. Alice is a character a bit like Rupert. I can't stand her because whereas Rupert was this lech, Alice is just this completely unlikable psychopath whom just ridiculous things happen and she just deals with it in ridiculous ways. There is a spoiler here. I'm going to give a big spoiler towards the end of the book because I don't recommend you read it. At the end of the book, her and this girl, who was the girlfriend of the guy she's murdered, find out they're both pregnant. They don't know who the fathers are because they've both been assaulted by a bit different people. But they both decide to run away together as a couple. Nobody checks out whether they've got a disease or goes to the doctors. It's just, they'll just check out. And the girl that's with her, while I presume she's clothed at this time, she's probably still got a very serious head injury because only the day before this happens, Alice had shot her in the head. So presumably there's a bit of her head missing, and yet she's pregnant and fine with it. How she knows she's pregnant a day after, never mind. It's bizarre. It really is. It's such a strange story. It's literally like Layman had an idea for something and made it up as he went along because it doesn't feel remotely structured. It's a whole series of events that take place which seem so unconnected and so random as to not feel like any sort of structure or thought has gone into how this story should be written, with the characters that are just ridiculous things. There's a bit in it in which the character actually mentions, because it's all in first person, you're in their headspace throughout the entire book. And they they actually mention that they don't know why any of this is happening, and neither does the reader. It's just, it would have been, I think, a fun short story if this was a, I don't know, a 40 or 50 page short story. It could have worked. It would have been bizarre and interesting. But as a 400 odd page book, it's just really difficult to get through because you don't get invested in any of it. You don't feel connected to any of it. It just feels so random and poorly plotted and structured and just a real mess, with a really unlikable character that you can't root for, and a whole series of events that just make you question, why are you doing any of this? Why is any of this happening? It wasn't funny, it wasn't scary. I think the only thing that has been mentioned, I don't agree that it's his best, but he does have a decent kill at the end. The way in which Alice disposes of her final opponent is fun. But other than that, yeah, I really didn't like this book. Not because I hate it, like I hate Island, just because I think it's such a complete mess. It just feels like Richard Lehman, when he wrote this, had no idea where he was going. He wrote maybe 10 pages of stuff and then just made a novel up on the spot, with no consideration of how it was supposed to be structured, and it's just a mess. It really is. Now, I know that there's bound to be people out there who love it, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you like this book, you like this book. We all like what we like, don't we? But for me, I've put this at number 36 because I just found this to be probably the sloppiest and poorest executed book that Lehman's wrote. So it's at number 36 on my list, and again, not one I really want to discover, not one that I recommend you start off with either. So that's After Midnight, number 36.